Hello and welcome to week 21's Dinosaw. So another 7 curious, interesting things I've seen in the last week I thought you might want to know about. So let's crack on. First one is the BBC and sharing of their empty sets. So beautifully named The Joy of Sets. So this is not new. So Disney Pixar did this a couple of weeks ago. So they recognised a sort of acute opportunity to use a lot of their background sets for things like Toy Story and Nemo, for instance. The BBC have gone one step further, which I think is really nice. They've taken a lot of their classic sets and backgrounds from all the way from 1958, I think, the Quatermass. All the way through to, you've got Swap Shop, got EastEnders, Dad's Army, Blackadder, Bread, Grange Hill, Yes Minister. So it's great. So they've basically dug it deep into the archives. So if you want to have one of these on your background to your call, then you can. There's quite a lot of interesting things about backgrounds of calls at the moment. It's a little bit like the equivalent of that. You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. A little bit nerdy, but yeah, if you want, it's fascinating to see them anyway, whether you're going to use them or not. So head over there. Second one's a little bit abnormal for one of these, which is I'm just going to talk about crate motors. So crate motors traditionally are if you wanted to do a custom build of a car or rebuild a car with a super hot engine in it, you would essentially buy what's called a crate motor. It would arrive in a crate, so you could just stick it in. So we're starting to see a good market now for EV crate motors. So as you can see, here's a VW Type 2 splits, and there are, we've seen Ferrari 430s, all sorts of cars, classic cars, as well as relatively modern cars. So if you want to do a conversion of a Volvo 420, you could buy a crate motor, stick it in. Up until this point, you would have probably needed to try and find a crashed EV already, like a Tesla, and they're hugely expensive and very dangerous to work on as well. So yeah, sort of crate motors. So we're starting to see a lot of cars get essentially revived or given a new lease of life because of crate motors. So it's it's an interesting crossover really between pistons and electric vehicles. Unreal Engine 5 was released, or at least a demo was released, so it won't be released until later next year. So Unreal Engine, if you don't know what it is, it's basically the rendering and gaming engine behind a lot of the big games that you know about, basically. So this is actually being rendered real time, so it's a huge step forward. So this is basically cinema quality, and it can do it real time as well. So it'll take a while for the developers to actually get the most out of this. So the demos like this are usually with everything turned on, and it takes a while for people on Xboxes or PlayStation 5s to try and get this level out of it. But you'll start to see that over the next maybe 3 years. Two things that are really interesting. One is that it's got a new dynamic lighting engine, which obviously they're playing quite heavily on here. And the second one is all about detail. So there's a new engine in there as well that can actually generate essentially the polygons in between the polygons, so that as your eye looks at a polygon, it can figure out the nuances that the developer doesn't have to put in there. So they just put the main polygons in. So your eye will never perceive a polygon because it'll always be filling in. Anytime your eye is about to perceive one, it'll create some more. So quite a neat trick. It frees up the developers to stop worrying about too much data in their models. So yeah, very neat. Go and have a look at it. It's pretty phenomenal, but it is just a demo. The Nationwide Degree Show caught my eye as well. So this was so Ocean Outdoor behind this. Well, 3 creatives who kind of came up with this idea, I believe, are behind it, and they've gone to Ocean Outdoor. This is what I'm presuming happens in the background. And Ocean Outdoor, who own a lot of the big, I guess, more sort of tech-filled displays around the country. So you've got things like Piccadilly Circus. I think they own Waterloo. They've got all sorts of also at Birmingham train station. So if you've seen some really big, really sort of tech-filled big digital spaces, it's probably at Ocean Outdoor. They've got those. So they've donated £49,000 worth of media to essentially, if you've done a degree and you've worked for 3 years to try and put your degree show together, and then all of a sudden COVID has said you can't really do that anymore, as everybody has found. So they've made the biggest degree show. So I think the deadline has gone now. You could submit your work, and then they would appear on billboards up and down the country for the entire country to see. So I think that's really, it's a really nice idea. Thanks to Ocean Outdoor for doing that. Yeah, let's see the artwork start to come through. Again, research papers. This is all about the perception of fullness when eating. So there is a direct connection between how much you chew and how full you think you are, or how satisfied you are with the food you're eating. So there have been lots of things around food before. So basically the haptics of food, like is it crunchy? If you amplify the sounds, Heston Blumenthal's done things around this. There's a scientist called Charles Spence, I think it is. He's got a great book called Gastrophysics. It talks about the size of the plates and the colour, and if you cut things into strips rather than cubes, your brain thinks the strips are more filling than the cubes, for instance. So there's lots of ways of fooling our psyche and our brain into thinking that we're eating more than we are. So this study was all about volume. Took the same amount of essentially cookie dough and used a 3D printer to use different algorithms really to print volume. So the first cookie you can see on the screen here is a pretty normal cookie. The next one has had more holes put in it, and the third one's had even more holes put in it. The people who are eating the one on the right hand side felt and chewed longer, so they felt it was more filling because they chewed for almost twice the amount of time. So that's interesting. Where my brain goes there is like, well, if food size is something to do with whether you feel full or not, then could this be a diet fad of the future? Big food. You maybe not heard it here first, but it's a curious thing to think about. Again, trying to keep your brains a little bit stretchy, we're straight onto cryptocurrency. So there is a big cryptocurrency exchange called Binance, and they have a charity arm. And what they've done is they've created a new token called a PPE token, so personal protective equipment token. So what this does is it pays couriers to deliver or pays people to deliver the protective gear to hospitals. So it's all great having the protective gear, but does it actually get delivered? So it's a little bit hard to explain, but essentially each token is worth about 2 cents, so it's not worth a huge amount. But if you're delivering 1,000 masks, then obviously that adds up. So what happens is that the courier has signed up to the system as a hospital. Courier delivers the masks, say 1,000 of them. Hospital then recognises this and basically releases 1,000 tokens, so $200 or whatever that is, no, $20. So basically what it's then doing is it's putting that on the blockchain, as cryptocurrency does, which is then making everything traceable. So what was bought, what was delivered, who sold it to, etc. So it's a really interesting, the money behind this is all actually charity money, so it's by Binance. They're putting up the money to actually pay for this whole system. So it's kind of really them creating a system for hospitals to use, almost to prove that cryptocurrency can actually be something quite useful in this sort of traceability and where a protective gear going. So yeah, interesting. And finally, I think I have to play this video specifically. So this is curious, again not new, but it's curious that this got through. So this is the OnePlus 8 Pro phone. Normal phones have 2 cameras on them, several cameras, some of them, and depending on which camera it is, usually you either get a really good filter on it, and there's an infrared filter and a UV filter so that you get really good photos, or is not. So with this camera, they can activate the infrared filter or not. So it chooses a slightly different camera. So if you then choose the camera without the infrared filter on it, basically the lower quality camera, you basically can see things with infrared as well. Now that has 2 slightly interesting applications. One is infrared can sometimes go through materials, so you can see heat as well. So you can see through certain plastics. So the video you just played on the left-hand side is actually looking at an Apple TV box. You switch the camera on through the filter, and lo and behold, you can see straight through the plastic all the electronics. Likewise, the Amazon remote control here, you can see straight through it. So that's curious, number one. But the second slightly creepier thing is you can actually probably see through clothes as well, to a certain extent. So Sony actually, I think, had to do a massive recall a couple of years ago because one of their video cameras had a filter on it that you could do this as well. So quite how that got through Q&A, I'm not really sure, but it's causing quite a lot of interest, should we say, on the internet right now. And that's it. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.